I'm a customer support specialist over here, and I'm gonna go ahead and get started. So if you have any questions as I go, just feel free to stop me at any time. I'm happy to answer anything. So to get started, I'm gonna go ahead and explain what Seller Shield is, and then I'm gonna show you guys an interactive demonstration. And then of course, like I said, I'll answer any questions as they come up. All right, so the reason why Seller Shield was founded is because, as you know, mistakes on the disclosure are the #1 cause of home sale lawsuits. And unfortunately, if the seller gets sued, then typically so does the agent and so does the brokerage. So Seller Shield was founded to help solve this problem. Now, the way that we do that can best be summed up into one sentence. Seller Shield prevents legal issues for sellers, agents, and brokers, and protects sellers if there is a claim. So we have our two products. We have our preventative product, which is our Smart Seller tools, and then we also have our protection product, which is our optional home sale legal protection. Now, since we've partnered with your brokerage, all listing clients of yours now gain free and exclusive access to the preventative tools, which is known as our Smart Seller tools. And again, this is at absolutely no cost to the agent or to the home seller. Now, the Smart Seller tools will benefit your clients by providing them with legal tips and interactive guidance as they fill out their disclosure forms. This is going to help to prevent lawsuits from happening, and it also helps to limit agent liability. Now, next we have our protection product, our home sale legal protection, which is available as a client gift from the agent or for the home seller to consider, but it is not mandatory to purchase it in order to fill out the disclosure using the tools. Now, it is something that's important to note and discuss with your sellers, because while agents, brokers, and title, you guys all have E&O insurance, the home seller is the only one left unprotected if there is a claim made. So the home sale legal protection would provide your sellers with up to $20,000 of paid legal representation in the event of a home sale claim. And this would be valid for up to 1, 2, or 3 years. So if your seller gets sued on any part of the sale, not just the disclosure notice, Seller Shield will hire an attorney to represent them. So this just provides your home sellers with some peace of mind, knowing that if the buyer does come after them with a legitimate or even a frivolous lawsuit, Seller Shield has a paid legal real estate attorney waiting to protect them. So guys, do we have any questions up to this point?
Nope.
All right, great. So I'm just going to go ahead and get into our demonstration. Now, the first thing that you're going to do is go ahead and go to sellershield.com. Now, you guys should have received your access emails. In that access email is a link that you can click. I know some of you guys are licensed in multiple states, so you might have different links based on your state. So what you can do that, or you can just go to agent login on sellershield.com. Then you would choose your state. I'm going to go ahead and start with Delaware, and then you'll put in your agent license ID and click continue. And then it'll ask you to either, if you've never logged in, it'll ask you to create a password. If you have logged in, you'll just enter your password there. And then it'll take you into your dashboard. Now, from here, you can do quite a few things. If you go up into the right-hand corner, you're going to see your name there. If you click on that, this is where you can go to your account settings. From there, you can update any of your personal information. So your email address, your password you can change, anything you need to do, you're going to do in your account settings. And this is also where you're going to go to sign out. We also have our agent resources page over here as well. If you click on this, you'll see a few different quick video tutorials that you can watch. And there's also an informational flyer that you can download and print for your sellers if they need. Now, when you're ready to actually go ahead and send your clients a disclosure, you're just going to go ahead and click on Invite New Seller. And then you'll put in the property information. And then you'll put in the primary seller information. Okay, and then it'll ask you to go ahead and confirm that email address. And then if you know right off the bat that you'll have more than one seller that needs to sign, you can go ahead and click on will an additional seller need to sign, and you can enter their information here. If you don't know right away, that's okay. You can always enter that information in later. And then you'll go ahead and choose which forms you need your client to complete. So we're gonna go ahead and click that disclosure of real property condition report. We'll click all of these, the rate and disclosure and the federal lead-based paint addendum, and click continue. And this is where you're going to be offered the opportunity to purchase one of those legal protections for your clients if you'd like. As you can see here, we have different pricing based on which package is chosen. We have the 1, 2, and 3 year. If you pay now, it's going to be $199. We give you a bit of a discount, or you can choose to pay at close of sale for $299, and that will come out of title. Now, if you scroll down here and you're just like, you know what, I'm not interested in purchasing this for my client right now, you just go ahead and click on no protection package and then click submit. And then access granted. You've successfully granted William Sells access to the Smart Seller tools. And then you can go ahead and either go back to your dashboard or just invite another seller. Also, if you ever need to go back to your dashboard, if you're ever anywhere and you're like, oh, how do I get back? You can also click on My Listings up in the left-hand corner, and that'll take you straight back to your dashboard. And then all of your properties that you've sent an invitation to will appear here, and you'll be able to see the status. So as we can see, William Sells, we've had the invitation sent. Once William has opened this invitation and started working on it, you'll see this change to access granted, and then it'll continue to change based on how far they are in the process. So I'm gonna go ahead and go in and check my email now. Now this is what your seller will see. Wait, nope, not that one. Where is it? Sometimes it takes a minute for the email to come through. This is good though if you notice that your seller isn't receiving their information, they haven't gotten their invitation, you can always click on the property and double check the information that you entered for them was correct. So you can just click over here. We see William Sells, ashley.valentine.sellershield.com. All right, that looks right. So we'll go ahead and go back. If this is incorrect, you can go ahead and edit listing, fix that email address, and then resend the invitation. Okay, and then you can go ahead and go back to My Listings. Well, that's just taking longer than normal. All right. Another thing I can show you while we're waiting for that email to come through is on your dashboard, you'll see this use your branding. All you have to do is click on that. If you would like to upgrade your account, this would create a personalized experience. It would be $9.99 a month. You'd be able to enter your headshot here, and then you'd also be able to adjust the initial message that goes out to your clients and personalize it to be specifically from you. That's something you can do. And if you say never mind, it'll just take you back, or to continue, it'll ask for your credit card information. So we're going to go back there. Let's see. Oh, it's not coming through for some reason. So, oh, there we go. All right. So this is what your client will see. They're going to get a Dear William, Team Valentine has provided you access to our Smart Seller tools. And then all they'll need to do is click on Go to Smart Seller Tools in order to start filling out their forms. Now they're going to get a welcome notice here, and then they'll just go ahead and continue. And then they're going to verify that their information is correct and create their own password. Now the reason why we have them create a password is so that they can always log back in. Say they save a section and they have to go make dinner. They can log out, log back in, and continue working on it later. All right, verify the property address. And then they're going to meet the Smarties. As you progress through your home sale process, the Smarties will guide you with tips and resources helping you to become not just a smart seller, but a protected seller. They'll click on Start Disclosure. And then they're going to be told a few facts. Disclosure forms are legal documents, but don't worry, our disclosure process is designed by legal experts. Mistakes disclosing the condition of the home are the #1 cause of home sale lawsuits, but don't fret, we provide tips and resources to help prevent mistakes. Even with accurate disclosure, there's still a risk after the sale. Common problems such as a roof leak can trigger a buyer claim well after the sale regardless of fault. But don't worry, you can walk away safe by opting into our home sale legal protection. Details to follow. They'll just click that they understand, and they'll go ahead and continue. And then they're offered the same protection package offer that you were for the same price points. And they can protect the sale or just say, you know what, I'll decide later. I just want to continue to my disclosure. And then you're ready to disclose. Understanding your risk means you're already one step closer. But before you can start disclosing, you need to accept the Seller Shield user agreement. So they can click on that to read through that and then just click that they have read and agree and click continue. And then this is where they'll get started. Now up in the right-hand corner, you're gonna see protect the sale, legal tips, and watch video. Protect the sale is just where they can opt into that home sale legal protection at any time as they're filling this out. Legal tips, we just have a few different things to get their mindset in order, just to get them prepared to start filling out their forms. All right, and they can always go back to that at any time, or they can watch a tutorial video to get them going as well. Now as they scroll down, we're going to explain that if you see this icon here, this means that if you click on it, you'll see definitions and examples. If you see this icon, you're going to learn more about common problem areas causing lawsuits. So as they scroll down, we're going to go ahead and just fill out some of this. Don't worry, I'm not going to do the whole form. Let's see. Okay, yes, primary. So as you see here, we've got a definition going on. All right, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna try to move on from this section and I'm not gonna answer this question. Now, if I do that, it's not gonna let me move on. I have to answer every single question in each section in order to save and continue. This is gonna help prevent you guys from getting back forms that are incomplete. All right, so they have to answer everything. Save and continue that. And then another thing to note here is if they answer, say yes to this question here, they're going to be prompted to describe more. The cool thing about this is that I can type as much as I want. Okay, these fields over here, they're going to expand. That way your client never feels like they have to edit their response. They can type as much as they want to, a whole novel if they want. All right, and then these will just continue to expand for them. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and log out of this account really quick. I do want to show you a couple other things, but I don't want to make you guys sit through the entire disclosure because it is pretty long. So what I will do is I'm going to go ahead and log into a different account that I have. Let's see, who do we have? Go over to... We're going to go over to review and sign. Now this is a disclosure that I've already completed. Now as the seller, I can go back and review all of the sections once I've completed them. So all I need to do is sign, but say I want to go back and look at a different section. I can just click on that section and it takes me right back into where I can change things if I need to. Okay, so as you scroll down, you're going to notice like this is one of those sections where we're going to have a lot of different definitions for folks because there's a lot of stuff that can get kind of confusing in here. Common problem areas causing lawsuits, pay special attention and disclose accurately. Flood zones are super important. We're going to have the FEMA's Flood Map Service Center so that they can see if their home is located within the flood zone. We have another one over here so they can learn more about what flood zones are. We have more common problems. Make sure all of these are going to change based on the question, just to really prepare them to make sure they disclose accurately. Okay. And once they've decided that everything here is good, they like everything, they're going to go ahead and go back to sign their disclosure. All they need to do is click on sign all documents. They'll type their name and then they'll select the date and click sign. Okay. All right, you're all done. Your signed disclosure is waiting for you in your email inbox, and they've also sent a copy to Team Valentine, your agent. Okay, and then they can go back to their dashboard. Now, your seller can log back into their account at any time if they need to make any changes or edits. So all they'll need to do is log back in. It'll take them here. They can edit the property and seller info, or they can make changes to the disclosure itself. They can also go over here and add protection if they'd like. As long as the home hasn't closed yet, they are eligible to purchase one of the protection plans. Or they can just go ahead and look at their completed disclosure, and they can see each page here. And this is going to be the format that it comes out in for them. Okay, and as you can see, their initials are going to be on each page. So you're never going to get back a form that is missing an initial or missing a signature. That's all going to be automatically added in here for you. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and click off that. Log out of Susie's account. Go ahead and go back over here. We're going to log out. So I want to show you something else. I know a lot of you guys have multiple accounts because you're licensed in both Delaware and Maryland, and some of you in Pennsylvania. Something important to note is that as you are logging into your different accounts, you must fully sign out of the account that you're in order to bring up your other account. For example, if I were to just X out of here and try to sign in as a different agent from a different state, I would not be able to. It would just log me right back into Team Valentine here in Delaware. So I have to click on my name and fully sign out in order to sign in as a different home seller or agent, I'm sorry. Now from here, I can go ahead and log back in to a different account. I'll use my agent license ID for that state and account and continue and enter my password for that and then sign in. Okay, and now I'm in that account over here, and you can see here that we have a completed form. Now, if say your seller's completed their form, but you notice, oh no, they need to make an edit, you can go up here and message the seller. All you need to do is click that, and it'll send them a message that says, you know what, it appears that you need to make some edits to your disclosure form. You can go back in. Now, this message will be available to you guys throughout the entire process. So if you see that someone is 25% done and they haven't looked at their forms in a week, you can click on this message seller button and the message will change. It will say, hey, don't forget you started your disclosure, but you're not quite done. Go ahead and log back in and work on it. That way you can really keep track of what they're doing. And then you can see that the disclosure documents are going to be based on state. So you're going to go ahead and look at this, and then this will be your Maryland residential property form. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and log out of that. So just make sure you guys all get in the habit of going ahead and signing out every time, just so that you don't have that confusion of, you know, I tried to send my seller their disclosure, it didn't go through, it says it's the wrong one, I sent them a Delaware one, but they're in Maryland. Just make sure you always get in that habit of logging out of each account. All right, and then I think I've covered just about everything. I threw a lot of information at you guys, so if you have any questions for me, please go ahead and feel free to shoot those out at me.
I think that was pretty good overview. Thank you, Ashley. I think some of us and a few of us had been on that other call, so some of us are familiar with the process that you just went through. So just having the recording now and you having kind of walked through it will probably be helpful for our agents. I think that some of the questions that, of course, some of our agents had were, what's the catch, right? Is there a cost to have the sellers, you know, have the assistance with the seller's disclosure? And I think you pretty much, you hit that, you addressed that. And it's an optional, you know, legal protection that the seller can opt for. And they are prompted to either accept it or not accept it. And they have a couple different choices to choose from. And it was my understanding from Matt Fedek that it sounds like it's about 1 in 5 sellers that are opting to take the coverage, and whether the seller pays for it, whether the agent pays for it, obviously that's, you know, up to both that seller and that agent to do that. But it can certainly be a helpful tool to have for a seller, given most things that occur after settlement usually stem back to the disclosure. So certainly a worthwhile element and, you know, certainly something to have available to us. And it seems like it, and not only that, but the help with the disclosures, all too many times, right? The disclosures are necessary. They're required everywhere, everywhere we do real estate, they're required. And so to be able to get the assistance from Seller Shield to help the seller complete them, because obviously the agent isn't able to. And so it takes some of that burden and liability off of the agent for you all to jump in and help that seller. So that's why Matt, I think, was such a proponent in wanting us to introduce this and have this available for our agents to utilize.
Yeah, that's so great. We're so happy to be on board with you guys and to start working with you. I do want to note that if you guys are licensed in multiple states and you notice that you don't have an account for some reason in one, like you can't look it up, just go ahead and send me an email. That's my direct email address there, and I can create that account for you. We might have just missed it in the rosters that we received. So it's super easy for us to create that. So don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm happy to do it. Another thing I did want to note with you guys, give me 1 second. Our system, the way that it's set up, we only allow an agent to have one agent email. It can't be used for multiple agents. So the way that we trick our system into allowing you to use your same email address for multiple accounts is your email address is going to look a little different to you in your account. So this is a Maryland account. If I look at my account settings, you'll see that the email here has my name plus something written here at sellershield.com. Now, the email is still going to go to ashley.valentine@sellershield.com, but this plus TM is tricking our system into thinking it's a different email address so it can be used for multiple agent accounts. So if you see that there, it is your correct email address. Don't change it. It's just we have it there so that it can you can use it for multiple accounts. I hope that made sense.
Yeah, well, you all did that for me, and I, of course, questioned it. I'm like, wait a minute, that's not a real email. So,
Yeah.
thank you for the explanation. So.
Yeah, no problem. I could see like people going in and changing it. I'm like, wait, it won't work.
Right. So thank you for that explanation.
You're welcome.
All right.
That's my direct line. Feel free to give me a call if you guys come up with any questions. I'm usually available Central Time, 8 to 4, Monday through Friday. I'm super happy to help you guys with anything. You can send me an email. We're happy to have you on board.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Ashley. Appreciate it. Appreciate your time. Thanks. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Have a great day, guys.
You too. All right. So now we've got Kurt, we've got Nita. I think I saw Michelle jump on.
I'm here.
Awesome. Thank you.
No, thank you guys for. Hi, Bridget. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good.
I'm very excited. On Friday, I'm finally going to be able to get a haircut. So.
That's quite a bar you've got behind you too.
Oh yeah, it's a little known fact. I'm also a level 3 whiskey sommelier. So I keep my own library for reference purposes.
Aha. Well, there you go. Perfect. All right. Well, so let's, I guess, just sort of dive in. Kurt, you, I think, were first probably notified maybe by Frank Serio with some question that had come up. It was probably now 2 weeks ago. I want to say it was probably 2 weeks ago, because it wasn't this past. We didn't have a sales meeting this past Tuesday, so it would have been the week before. When honestly, how it kind of came about, I actually brought it up, and how it came about was we do a weekly sales meeting, and as we were going through our list of new active listings and new and changes in our statuses, I came upon a sheet that had a large number of transactions that were in an A/C status. And so that just kind of opened up the dialogue discussion, if you will, as to, are they, as you probably well know, right, in our former MLS, you could only utilize that status when it was, you had to have that must sell addendum. It had to have, be in that active with kickout. Whereas today, that is a little different. And so, anyway, we got Frank on the call. He kind of, weighed in. He then went back to you all, I think, to clarify. He called me, and then he said, you know what, why don't you have Kurt on a call? And I said, great idea. So I guess that's where I maybe would like to start, is if you all want to give us, from your perspective, the definition, if you will, and the uses of when you can use that status, because it's starting to be heavily used in our market. And they are just the normal contingencies: home inspection, financing, pretty much appraisal. That's it.
Well, thanks for asking the question. It's something that comes up pretty frequently, especially in hot markets, because, sellers like to keep their options open when you get into hot markets, and they don't necessarily, especially during a market like COVID, where they're not sure where the offer is coming from or what the quality is. People make decisions. They want to, again, keep their options open. So I'm going to go ahead and just throw this over to Michelle for a little bit as our policy manager. I'll go and talk a little bit about active under contract and its proper use.
So the active under contract is whenever you have a contract on a property, if the seller still wishes to accept backup contracts or, wants to get showings or whatever, that's what we have the active under contract. It doesn't necessarily have to be because it has a kickout clause or it doesn't have a kickout clause. They may have instructed you to continue to market the property. So with active under contract, the specification we made on it is that property has to be available for showing. And it has to be willing to accept a backup offer, whether it has a kickout or it doesn't have a kickout. Recently, when I say recently, everything runs so quickly, it wasn't that recent. We added as a mandatory field kickout, yes, no. So if you see an active under contract property and your buyer's only interested in ones that have a kickout clause, you can search by that. By the same token, if your buyer really wants to be in a certain area and there's a house that's under that, and that seller is entertaining backup offers, you might want to have them see it and see if they want to put in a backup offer. It gives more opportunity. Pending, on the other hand, is the seller doesn't want backup offers. They don't want it shown. And for that reason, it goes into pending status. And generally, the seller is more confident that sale will go through. So, so that, that's the major distinction and the way you can check to see if there's a kickout clause or not.
Now, we do understand that we have a lot of requests to better identify kickout clauses versus non-kickout clauses. And so prior to the pandemic, we were actually well on our way to working with CoreLogic to produce a better way to identify kickout clauses as a part of searching for active properties and active under contract property. So you could specify just kickouts as a part of putting in active under contract or active. Right now, you have to kind of separate the two. It's either you search for actives or active under contract, and then you select under additional fields kickout clauses. So we're working on a solution with CoreLogic as a way to combine the two. There's actually programmatic boundaries between the two in Matrix right now, permitting us to do it. And we were all on our way before COVID happened, but COVID kind of changed the game for everybody, including us, in terms of we're putting a lot of our work and our efforts in. Now that things hopefully are getting back to normalcy again, we're going to continue to work with CoreLogic and their Matrix program to, again, find a better way to include just kickout clauses with active listings. So that's what we're hearing from most people, what they really want. They want a better differentiation between active under contract with a kickout and those where the seller simply just wants to continue to show the property, but there's nothing they can really do right now. So we recognize that need and we're working towards a better solution for it. Does that make sense?
So basic, if I'm hearing correctly, then you can, if I have a property, I'm representing the seller, I get an offer and it has the normal contingencies, has financing, has home inspection contingency. My seller is willing to continue to, they would like to continue to have the property still be actively marketed, and will also entertain backup offers that, and accept, entertain backup offers. Then in that case, I am able to use that status, active continue to show.
Right, or what is now called active under contract, which
Active
is,
under contract.
yeah, which was the same thing. I mean, it really, it was what was called active continue to show is also part of the active under contract status now.
And the key
So-
two pieces are accepting showings and accepting backup offers.
Right.
So, okay. I think that the big sort of hang up here is, so now I'm representing a buyer. And I've got a buyer, and I've made a great solid offer, and I don't want that seller's property to continue to be actively marketed. I got a solid offer, it's under contract, it's pending, I've got the loan, it's approved, it's ready to go, and I don't necessarily want them to continue to market it and continue to necessarily get other people to sort of see, come in and show it and so forth. Why would I ever it sounds like a buyer's agent doesn't have a leg to stand on to get or ask a seller's agent to change that status to be pending, because we're not requiring that the buyer's agent approve or authorize that it's okay for that seller to go ahead and keep it in an active continue to show.
Well, that's where I actually have personal experience with this on both sides. Okay. When I bought my first house, because I worked for actually bought my second house. I was working for the MLS. I understood how those statuses were working. I actually had my agent write up an addendum as a part of my offer that the listing is to not accept any additional showings until I fall through. If there's any reason why I can't come through with my end of the deal, you are to go pending and not to accept any showings or any backup offers, and they accepted it. But the key part is the seller signs that as a part of that offer. And it's contingent upon the agent's understanding how that works. And because I work for the MLS, I kind of had that inside knowledge of how it worked, and I was able to negotiate on my own behalf for having that knowledge. Also, on the second side, in terms of active under contract, both times I've sold houses, they've both been under active under contract, and I got really good deals when I moved active under contract. So it does have a definite, very strong financial aspect. But also from a buyer's perspective, and I talked a little bit about it before, is that we understand that you want to have better options in terms of identifying what are really the sellers who are motivated, right, to take other offers. And that's why we want to find a better way of including kickouts specifically, so you can specify you only want kickouts, and then also search actives along with them to give you a better idea of what your odds are in putting those offers. But for the meantime, I fully endorse running up addendums and having that included as to what you expect the seller to do while you're pending.
So I guess my question is, I'll go back to representing a seller.
Yeah.
Why would I ever advise my seller to not continue to actively market their property and continue, to take backup offers? Why would I ever encourage a seller to put it in a pending status?
Well, and I think I'm going to say that really, the same token, why would you encourage them to do that? And I think it really depends on the circumstances for that buyer. How strong do you feel? Two, showing a house is not, having your house show ready is not an easy thing. Not being able to be in your home, having people pop by, do that kind of stuff. Some sellers may say, and I've heard a lot of sellers who say, once I get that offer and I feel like it's a really good, strong offer, I'm done with all that. I'm just waiting for it to close. So I do think in this case, it's really seller driven, and it's, the advice is, here are the pros, here's the cons, because you are in a anybody who submits an offer will be in a secondary position. You know, it means that you're going to have your house clean and whatever else you have to do until, you know, we decide we go to settlement. And that may or may not be. If I got children, small children, I may not want to deal with that, especially, you know, if I can't send them off to school, you know. So I think you know, it's not just, it's presenting all sides to your seller and really doing the best thing for your, you know, letting your seller make that decision, because a lot of the agreements will say they'll continue to solicit offers and market it until it closes.
But the market also still tells us that overall the sellers prefer to go pending. They prefer to work through the transaction and then come to a conclusion with it.
Yeah.
But
well,
the options have to be available. Most of our states have legal mandates that we operate in, that you must allow the ability to continue to show and accept backup offers up into the middle to the point that they sign and the house is sold.
Yeah.
So there's concerns we have to have there too, to make sure the seller maintains that ability regardless, because the state laws aren't really specific upon it, whether they're contingent or have a kick out or not. It's just the right of the seller to continue to show and accept backups until that property is sold.
Exactly.
So that's a consideration we have to have too.
Yeah. Well, I think that there's, you know, I see two things, I guess, sort of in play here. One is, right, MLS is obviously servicing thousands of agents and several states, many jurisdictions beyond just our market. Formerly, our market, we didn't have the issue that Michelle kind of presented a lot, because most of our homes are unoccupied. So therefore, a seller really doesn't care how many people are, you know, kind of coming through it. So in a primary market, I totally get that and I totally understand that. And so therefore, this status is, you know, when we had our own MLS here, it was very restrictive in that regard. You couldn't do what you did, Kurt. You couldn't do that addendum that you proposed. That was not acceptable. You were violating MLS rules previously, you know, under that, because.
But could I legally do it? So my question is, if I can legally do it, as an MLS, my main concern is, do we become an organization that tries to overly restrict beyond the law? I mean, are we a regulatory body, or are we a marketplace that has rules that are necessary? That's a concern that I think MLSs have overall.
Mm-hmm.
Not to overreach, and to make sure that we are facilitating a marketplace and not necessarily restricting a marketplace.
I don't disagree. I'm just sharing with you that it's changed. And I think that formerly, many of our agents had become accustomed to how those statuses were being used and not being used. And therefore, quite frankly, it's only seemed to be more recent.
Well, we're
this status.
Yeah, we're in the process of doing that.
Charlene, you need to mute
that's
yourself.
One of the things Bridget's going to talk to Becky and Dawn about, to see how many people are doing.
I'm muting her. Sorry. All right, I
That's
just
okay.
muted her. Sorry.
It happens.
She probably didn't realize. Zoom etiquette, right?
Yeah.
Go by Zoom etiquette. Anyway, so it's just, I think it's really come down to more of that. It's just, I think that it just seemed to be more used more widely now than it had been. Mm-hmm. So it kind of came to my, you know, obviously it caught my eye when I saw it, because I wasn't accustomed to seeing a list of ours with so many active, you know, continue to show. And I think many of our agents, you know, they're like, hey, you know what? We had not been kind of accustomed to using that. We had been, if it was a good contract, good solid contract, we put it pending. And when I think that they were seeing, when they were going up against in other situations with co-brokes, and that status was being more readily used, it started to become a bit more of a trend in our company. And so I just wanted to make sure that if what are the ground rules, right? I just really wanted to be really crystal clear as far as what are the ground rules, because I want to obviously adhere to and follow it, as do, right, all of our agents too. So.
And one thing that's also informative with this is inventory levels. Is that, I mean, we've seen inventory levels shrink, not precipitously, not just in COVID, but prior to COVID. And that's when you see things like this people get more creative, because they understand that the inventory is not, supply is not meeting demand. So people understand there are more options out there, so they tend to explore more options. for their sellers. So it's something that we take into consideration too, but I absolutely agree that it's about clarity, understanding what these statuses mean and what you can do underneath them. Absolutely.
Yeah, and as Kurt mentioned, there needs to be better clarity as to that status and the kick out and no kick out. And that's something we're working for, so that when your buyer says, hey, I saw this house, you can say, hey, yeah, here's the deal on it. And you don't have to really do much research. Or when you're looking for properties, when you're representing a buyer, you can explain those things to the buyer, saying they have, a home inspection contingency. And, it may or may not get passed, and the odds are most of them do, unless the house has got some serious problems. And then the house has serious problems, that's a different ball of wax altogether as far as the buyer is concerned. But it does give more of an opportunity for people to, see that. And we want to make it clearer so that agents can make a more informed decision. We're also trying to make that clearer on any public facing website that we send data to, so that will be easier.
Yes,
And
we do
Expand
identify the
upon
need
that.
for transparency.
So what happens is that some of the public facing websites, whether it could be IDX or whatever, if you were to search active, like in Bright, you can choose to just do active or active under contract, even though it defaults to both of them. Some of the public facing websites will automatically give you both, and they don't give you the opportunity to distinguish between active and active under contract. In Bright, our system defaults, so you have active and active under contract, but if I just wanted active, I could unclick the status for active under contract and just get active. So, we can't change it, but we're trying to present what the issues are with that, so that people can do that.
And it ebbs and flows. And also I take a look at, keep in mind, our entire footprint, while active under contract is probably being used a bit more than it has, it's still the minority of under contract statuses. If you're finding that in any market that you are seeing a sudden gigantic increase in active under contract, or if it becomes almost homogenous in a certain market, that's usually a red flag. And that usually means that they're not accepting showings in every single one of those listings. Now, they may be very well, but that's a leading indicator that maybe check to see if they are accepting showings, they are accepting backup offers, because this is sometimes, abused as well. So.
And if they're not, please let us know.
Yes.
One of the reasons that we did see an increase during COVID is that we saw an increase in the number of contracts that had a contingency that said showing. So, we're going to write a contract. We've done a virtual one, but we're not going through with this until we actually get an opportunity to show that property. And in Pennsylvania, that only became realistic in the last week, basically, in many areas. So, a lot of people, especially because of the nature of COVID being worried, they would accept that kind of offer, that kind of contract, because they don't know. They wanted to get the contract, and they really didn't know what COVID would do to the marketplace. So I do think that, we did see an increase in active under contract, and we did see an increase of what we call, under contingency type other, because we didn't have one that said, we didn't have a contingency type that says, showing, must be able to show the property. That was whoever thought about that before COVID, and so, we have, so that's one of the factors in seeing an increase in those. It'll be interesting to see if that goes away, how the market will play out over the next, I'm going to say 60 days. COVID turned a lot of things upside down for a lot of us.
I apologize for jumping in late on this, but I can tell you, working with this active with contract in Pennsylvania has been a nightmare for years. We had it with Trend. It was abused. You'd have active with contract. You go to call to show the property. They'd say, no showings. wouldn't block, then some of them would actually block the showings with active with contract so we could report those. It's, as far as I'm concerned, that active with contract benefits nobody but the agent who manages to keep that property on the internet and advertise it that way, because Zillow still draws that out as an active listing and they don't distinguish the active with contract. And I apologize if you already went over that, but that's the number one big problem. Personally, I think there should be a pending or an active, and that's it. The active with contract serves no good purpose. We've been trying to deal with it forever and ever. Everybody's idea of what's contingent that qualifies under that is different. I don't think there's a happy medium here whatsoever. And I'm sure Delaware is struggling with this tremendously because they certainly didn't have to deal with this before. And that was a blessing.
And it's something that has been, it's regularly discussed as to the best way to handle that at the highest levels of the organization as well. But in terms of it benefiting people, again, twice I have benefited greatly from active under contract. To the tune of my last sale of a home, I made $30,000 more, got a cash offer and no inspections, only because I went active under contract and I started getting people that were competing coming in for the property. So as a seller, I did benefit from that. But we definitely understand that it's debated. It always has been. And Jane, you know from our experience that it's always been a back and forth with active under contract, but it's always been our leadership's belief that there has to be some ability to have that disclosure that property, because the alternative isn't necessarily that it goes pending. The alternative that we've seen is that people just put it active and there is no disclosure that's currently under contract. You pick up that phone, you call them, and they say, oh, by the way, it's under contract. Yeah. And that tends to be what the alternative is, not that everybody just goes pending and LX nice. That's
or sometimes they let you show it while it's under contract.
And they absolutely have to. I mean, that's part of it, and that's part of the policing process.
So can I ask, going back to something you had said, Michelle, with respect to a couple things. One was that when you go to do a search in the MLS, that the active under contract is set as a default, that it's actually selected unless you deselect it.
Correct.
Okay, that's not the case. I just did a search while we were on the call and I had to change my own settings to create my own personal settings to include it. But just as a default, it's not a default.
So this may be something that was changed when you first went on, because when I do my search and I go into a lot of offices, it's an automatic default. People can change it. It could very well be that it was something that you changed or you didn't realize that you changed 3, 4, 5 years ago. So
the default, I believe, is actually active and coming soon. I think active under contract is something.
I'm sorry, it is active and coming soon, not active and active under contract. I'm so sorry, I said that wrong. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, those are the two defaults.
Yeah, those are the two defaults. I don't know why I was thinking active under contract. Sorry.
Well, I think active under contract back in the old systems were that. So I think that's probably what we're thinking.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
What's your preference on that? Is that something that you would want to have included in a default, or something that your opinion would be you'd still want to be an option from the subscriber?
So I guess I'll come at it from two schools of thought. If I'm representing the seller, yeah, I want it as a default, because I want to continue to be able to actively market it, and I want agents to see that it's still available for showings and for backup offers. If I am representing a buyer, I don't know that I want everybody else to go and show that property, because I've already got it locked up with my buyer. Yeah. So kind of going back to Jane's point, it seems to be more about the agents than it does about the buyers and the sellers sometimes. So Kurt, obviously you had an example where it obviously benefited you when you were the seller, but I think just in practice, it's just something we're trying to get my head around, and everybody else trying to, I think, get their head around.
From a policing standpoint, before we had the active under contract status, where we had it to include being able, that you had to show it till we clarified that policy. And in the past, and Jane, you may have realized, and you said something to this effect, is it was amazing how many people would keep it in active status just to get that additional exposure on the internet sites, on, you know, going to Zillow and doing that stuff. And from a point of view is that we would not know that there was a contract until that buyer's agent reported it to us. And sometimes they wouldn't report it to us because they didn't want to jeopardize anything they had going with the sale of that property. So it might be an independent third party who tried to do a showing, you know, get a showing going. So it, you know, this has reduced that by hopefully giving people more indication that there is actually a contract on it. I'm not saying that it has stopped it completely, because where there's a will, there's a way. People will play games, you know?
So
If we removed every field that people abuse, we'd have like 3 of them.
And then they'd still be abused.
Yeah.
So Kurt, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Jane. Yeah, I see Ginny Hysack. She has a question. So go ahead,
The
Jane.
property came up last week and went to try to show it and it was blocked. It was showing active. It came on Monday and it was blocked every day. I called the agent, didn't get a call back. All of a sudden it's 12 to 5 on Saturday that it's available for showings. Is that a legal entry?
No, the policy says it has to be available for showing as soon as it goes into active status.
Yep.
Now, you know, if it's a really hot property and they put in active status, or if it's in coming soon, sometimes I see things in coming soon that are desirable properties. We'll see that they got showings on the day it goes active for like 3 days in a row. But just the fact that you're trying to block it out and save time to show it, to wait till the open house to show it on Saturday is a violation.
Yeah, the appropriate move in that would be to go to coming soon and then list your first day of showings as being on Sunday, and then on Sunday morning you go active.
Which is exactly what I have right now. But this
Yeah.
property did not do that. And I reported it right away to Trend because I did try to go on the high road, get the agent. He didn't return my call. By the time he returns my call, they've got 2 over asking prices. The property hasn't even been shown yet.
Yeah.
I get it, but he absolutely, hands down, did that to get it into the internet marketing.
Yeah, I don't know if it was your property or another person that I got involved with earlier this week with that agent, but we do sanction people. So I don't want to say it was that one, because I've had a few come up this week. I have a few come up every week. It's not, you know, and I can't remember off the top of my head whose complaint is with each one. So to be honest with you, but we do sanction people. You know, if we can see through the back end that, yeah, they've got, you know, 15 appointments scheduled in 2 days, hey, not much I can do with different people, you know.
What is this? What is that? What is that fine?
Well, I'm sorry, what we do is we look at if it's in showing time, or we can ask for additional documentation or information, which is something that you guys can't do, but we can ask for different pieces of info. So, which is why sometimes when you give us a complaint and we'll say, hey, we're checking it out, it's not something I can just, you know, look at right away. I have to do back end searches and
Sure.
try to reach out. And sometimes I luck into something really easy, and other times it can take me 3, 4, 5 days to pull the information. We don't want to find people, you know, if they're doing everything right. So we do try to cross our T's and dot our I's, you know, as best we can before we just take, people are not guilty until we can prove they're guilty. Let's put it that way.
You're being pretty kind.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't want it done to me. And
No,
even then, we sometimes,
these are deliberate. These are experienced agents. These are deliberate.
you know, and even then, we've made mistakes where the paperwork with the information we've gotten and everything we've gotten, or the agent hasn't responded, or they only gave us one piece of it, all the evidence shows that they're guilty. And then, you know, they get this fine and they come back and they say, but there's all this information. I'm like, well, why didn't you give me that up in the first place? Because, you know.
Well.
You know, and sometimes it could be miscommunication or whatever, but yeah, the reality of it is historically and even now, most agents want to do the right thing. We do have a hardcore group of agents in every area who just don't think the rules apply to them. And
You
you
have
know,
you have one of the largest franchises in Montgomery County who does not put their properties in the MLS as under contract. They keep them active for as absolutely long as they can until
And
they
Jane,
get caught.
and Jane, you follow up with me, follow up with Brian
Yeah.
on that as well, Brian Preston,
Mhm.
and we'll make sure that gets fully vetted, because if
yeah, I was
that's
gonna say,
happening,
Kurt, let's
Yeah.
get me that
They've been
information.
reported multiple times. So it's
Okay.
get us as
Okay.
RVPs,
I'm
get us
glad to.
involved. We're the individual
Yeah.
CEOs of our regions.
Okay.
Get us involved to help out.
And they'll
We can
get
make
me
sure it gets
involved.
in front of the right people.
And they're
Yeah,
also
he'll-
they're in Delaware too. They're in Delaware too.
He'll
Can I
he'll
go to,
get in front of me.
Can I go to Ginny? I know Ginny has had her hand up. So Ginny, go ahead, ask away. Now she's forgotten her question probably. All right, maybe she doesn't have a question. All right, maybe she didn't have a question. All right, she had her hand up. So the other thing that I wanted to ask you about, Michelle, was number one on that default setting, but also something you had mentioned about you're working, and I think this is something that Frank had mentioned to me as well, is that Bright is wanting to work with those third party, if you will, syndicator sites, so that when a consumer is searching for a property that is active, that it currently either if it's pending, it's not even going to show up. But if
Right.
it's active or active under contract, it is going to show up, but yet it doesn't show that it's active under contract.
Correct.
You're saying that that is something that you're working with them,
We're
so
trying-
that status will show?
That's what we're trying to work with them. Now, the problem that a lot of these third-party syndicators have is that they get data from every MLS across the nation, and they get them from brokers individually. And so they have a challenge there to figure out what each of these statuses mean and what category it should be in. So while we may call it active under contract, and somebody else may call it, you know, active continue to show or whatever, it's, you know, we've talked to them, we're trying to see if we can get something that clarifies it more. They're a little resistant. You know, we don't send the data to these sites unless the brokers requested us to do so. And even then, you know, I don't know that people understand all the ramifications. And, you know, by one token, you know, if you're one of your buyers sees it on, we'll just use the Z word, Zillow, you know, and they say, oh, I see this property is active. You can say, well, I got a little more info for you. You know, it's got a contract on it and it has a contingency. So in one respect, it, you know, shows you as having more information, but by the same token, your buyer, you know, he's looking for things on Zillow and trying to say, why aren't you showing me this one?
Yeah, specifically, a lot of people don't know this, but 60% of all the data that shows up in Zillow for our region, it comes directly from the broker. It doesn't come from Bright. So Zillow has always prioritized broker level information. So it goes from Bright to say the broker, and then the broker supplies that over to Zillow. And then there's a massaging that takes place between the broker and Zillow, because in the end, the relationship is between the brokerage and Zillow, and Bright is the data middleman in that situation. So it's one thing to keep in mind that depending upon the brokerage that you're using, they probably have our syndication dashboard turned off, and they're using their own internal one more often than not to syndicate that information out there.
And, you know, with NAR's recent requirement that any broker can get their own data and do with it whatever they want, which Bright has never said you couldn't do that. We've always, you know, if a broker, it has to actually be the broker, it can't be an agent. But if a broker's wanted the data, you know, we've always said, here, we're going to give you the data in the standard RETS format. You know, you do with it whatever you want because it's the broker's data. With that happening, although we haven't seen an increase, but that's maybe because we've been doing it all along, we may find more brokers deciding to send their own data to sites that we don't have any oversight on.
I guess another specific example of that is, say, for years we had an issue, I think, I'm not sure exactly which one it was on, but I think it was Zillow, where they were displaying total square footage, livable square footage in Zillow as being the above grade. And that's how it would get translated. But because the broker was essentially massaging that in the back end and then providing that over to the Zillow feed. Whereas if it came from Bright, it would actually be a different number because it was only in that field on the Reds feed giving the above ground interior square footage. So it can lead to issues like that too.
So Renee sent a chat message about, okay, and I'm just going, it says, can they clarify active under contract and pending again, please? I missed the start, just a summary reminder maybe. Okay, so active under contract, if you don't mind, I'll just answer this for her. Active under contract means that they have a contract with contingencies, but they are accepting backup contracts and the property must be available for showing. Pending means that they're not allowing showings and they're not accepting backup contracts. That's quick and dirty.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Oh, your phone is working now. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think Ginny, her microphone wasn't working before. Ginny, you want to go ahead and ask your question? Maybe not. Poor Ginny. She's having technical difficulties.
Yeah,
All
I just want to make sure I didn't miss any questions. So.
Understood. So then the other question that I had for you, which was also something that had come through, was that came up on that call, was about ground rent, land lease, and leasehold improvement. And obviously we are not the only area, right, in Bright MLS footprint that has these, sort of circumstances. But yet there are issues that have come about depending on what the scenarios are here. And I know I've got a few people on the call that some specialize in Sea Colony, which has an entirely different type of, say land lease that exists than somebody that is purchasing a mobile home in a mobile home park.
Right. And so we've kind of, our attitude is you need to default to what your either state or county regulation says about that property. Now, that being said, for example, ground rent in Maryland has 200 years of history behind it, and it has to be a specific way. Whereas a land lease or leasehold may differs in Maryland than it did in, as a Baltimore City. Baltimore City and part of Anne Arundel County had a specific ground rent that had to be disclosed as part of the licensing law and legal requirements. And the only other place that has this, the only two other places in the US that have it is Boston and Hawaii that have the same situation. So it is not as good as it can be. And it is something I'm going to tell you, we are going to work on that, trying to get it better, get you more options. I'm not sure how we should have this looking, but we need to get that better so that, because there are different flavors of land lease, land rent, ground rent. There are different flavors of it in different states. And in fact, they can even differ within the states and the counties of the jurisdictions.
Well, how are you defining ground rent? Meaning, so like in the case of, we'll take Sea Colony, where it could be redeemable.
And if that's the case, that can be that would be because all ground rents, as I know, if they're a ground rent, one of the requirements is it has to be redeemable versus a land lease, which does not have to be redeemable. Now, I'm saying this at the 50,000 foot level because there may be specific items within a state or a county law, and I can't, that may have changes to it, and that's one of the problems with it. But in most places, if you have a ground rent that is redeemed, if you have I'm going to say it's a rent on the land of some sort that's redeemable, it goes really as to being a ground rent.
That tends to be our general definition. That's one that we use
Yeah.
inside of Maryland as well. Is
Yeah.
that a ground rent, that the basic definition are very broad and probably not wholly accurate in all cases, is land lease tends to be non-redeemable while ground rent tends to be redeemable. Sea Colony, I remember I worked very directly on the bringing in Sussex County. And I believe that the Sea Colony is actually condos on top of ground rent, which is a whole hairball of ownership options that are there. So that's one of the most unique situations I've worked through was the Sea Colony. And that diving into that is just, it's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, there are places where, they'll have a 99-year ground rent, or land, not a ground rent, I'm sorry, a leasehold or a rent, a land rent, and they'll have a 99-year on a property. And part of the, what's interesting about those is that when you want to make sure you get them disclosed, because when that time frame is up, some of these documents aren't real clear to describe what happens. And if it's a newer property, and I see a lot more of that in Delaware than any place else, where they have a lot more of people who have held on to their land and will allow people to build on the land.
Yeah, actually, Bob Andrus, one of our customer success coaches, a lot of you probably know him. His house is a 99-year land lease.
Yeah.
And near Wilmington.
Yeah.
But he owns the actual physical house on top of it, and it's a stick-built single-family home.
Yeah. So it's not always easy, and I don't know that it means the same in every state and every jurisdiction of every state, but we will work on that. Try to get better definitions and clearer things, but it's still, the people are still going to need to understand what that term or what it means in your state.
How did you refer to Sea Colony previously? How would you handle the form of ownership there?
So I just saw, I think I've got on here, I don't know if he's still on. I don't know if Bill Hand is still on, and I know Steve A just jumped on. They can probably, I'm kind of defer to one of them.
Hi, Bridget, it's Jill.
Hi, Jill. Oh, Jill.
Yeah, I live in Sea Colony. Plus, I've sold a number of homes in here. And Sea Colony is a 99-year land lease, and they are all condos. I happen to live in a single-family, stick-built home, but it's a condo regime as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, once you understand all that, it's not that difficult, but it is confusing when you look in the MLS at, the ground lease, the land rent, etc. I don't know if that clears anything up, but.
And is that land lease redeemable or no?
Yes, this is Steve Alexander. That's the issue in the MLS part, is that there is not a clear, there is ground rent and there's land lease categories both, and it's not clear which they would fall into. The ground lease is redeemable, but at the same time, you don't own it until you redeem it, obviously. It's sort of a blend. When I've talked to people from Bright before, it's been sort of a blend between the two of how that stuff's recognized in other areas.
Right, and then once you redeem it, then, you own it straight out. So I think, there's definite room for improvement by Bright on this.
And what you own is you own a percentage fee simple ownership interest, which may be different than if you had a restaurant, say a standalone building sitting on leased ground that then you bought out the ground and you would own the entirety of that plot. Like phase 22 is 12 homes and, call it an acre, 2 acres of land, whatever it is, 3 acres. You'd own 1/12 of the structures and that land when you.
So Michelle, hearing that, technically under how we're currently sort of categorizing things, this would be a fractional ground rent land lease condo. We need to do work on that. Yeah, we have to figure out.
And
that qualifies literally for 4 different form of ownerships. that we
Yeah.
have underneath our ownership handling. So yeah,
It could
we
be,
don't wanna get into
or we
detail.
can make some, try to figure out one way to describe that, because in some places, in some terms, you know, it also, I think, depends on what the terms of the buyout. In some areas, once you redeem your ground rent, you own the land. It's no longer, you know, it's yours to own strictly. It's not, and in other places, it's a percentage or you're part of a whole. So it just varies so much. And I think that's the complexity of that. And, you know, who was it that said that? About, no, some before
don't know.
Steve, you know, had said something about, maybe it was Jenny. No, they said something about the fact that, you know, once you understand it, it's easy to explain, but to understand it is hard. And so it's an area we definitely have to work on and get better at. And now I know who to go to, which office to go to when I have questions.
Also, for the meantime, Michelle, I know we have to do some work on this, but would your general recommendation be to currently handle it now the way they traditionally handled that would be to marks like Sea Colony as a land lease?
Yeah, I would say land lease. If it's not redeemable, well, I would do what you're doing traditionally now.
Yeah.
And what we're going to have to do is whatever we decide on, we're going to have to consider, and this is what was common practice, so that we don't all of a sudden, when you're trying to look at, you know, property history and see what happened, we're not changing this stuff on you. That's going to be one of the things we have to make sure we do.
We
But
don't
I
want to
would
become
say
an
continue
impediment.
to do what you're doing.
That's, if not to interrupt you, but that's the issue, is
Yeah.
that there is no standard now. So when I had this conversation a year and a half, 2 years ago with people from Bright, we did a search while we were in that meeting, and it came up depending on where you are, depending on who the agent is, depending on what it is, like in the same community, you had potentially you had 3 or 4 different ways it was done. And it also prompts, once you're into the thing, so if you did it as a ground rent thing versus the land lease, and I don't remember the specifics of all this, but it prompts you to provide different information then, which then also becomes confusing. You
So
know,
this is a bit of a hairball before Bright took over too. Then you'd like us to have more.
No, we were all good. It's you guys added the difference between, you added land lease as a category. We didn't have that. It was it was either a fee simple deal or it was something else, but it was very clear. There was only one choice. You know, it might have been that we were condominium as a property type, and then below that was, you could put in the ground rent amount.
Okay.
But you guys added that second category, and then when I've called Bright about getting a definition, I get definitions that don't really apply clearly. There's not a clear category it falls into, because there's elements of, as you said, there's elements of both that.
There's elements of four current ownership types. So we definitely need to get more on that.
Yeah, and we get more detail and try to make it easy, because keep in mind, whatever we do for Sea Colony, what may not play well in another area, so we got to figure it out.
Yeah, and I would say in our area, it's not like there's Sea Colony, there's Towns of Bethany proper, there's Rehoboth by the Sea. All of these are land lease, ground rent type scenarios, and each of them vary a little bit as well. Like Towns of Bethany is redeemable automatically. The ones up Rehoboth by the Sea, it's only if the family decides they want to sell you one.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, definitely. We will do more work on this.
Okay. Well, thank you. So what other questions, while we've got Kurt and Michelle and Anita on with us, that we didn't answer relative to the either active under contract or relative to the ground rent land lease? And sounds like Steve A. volunteered himself to help you all and work with you on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. We'd love to talk to you, Steve.
Yep.
Steve, so instead of calling you Steve A., what's your last name?
Yeah, sorry.
Alexander.
I mean, I'm sure if I called Bridget and said, who's Steve A., she'd tell me.
Sorry about that.
But I'm just not feeling very psychic today on these things.
Sorry.
So Jenny asked a question, if you don't mind. And it's been up here for a while. Can we require that the listing agent place a comment for initials on the accepted AOS, which I'm guessing is
Agreement of sale.
stating that the seller wants to continue to show as active under contract. A lot of the these offers and sales contracts have that as part of them. We don't do the contracts, but it is something you may want to talk to your board or your association about that, so it's clear, not only for the buyer, but also for the agent who has somebody, so they know what their expectations are.
It varies from state to state.
Yep. And even within associations, the local associations too.
I know in Pennsylvania where I live, it's assumed. You don't have to have permission to show once you're under contract. It's assumed you have permission. We have to write as an addendum saying, and have the seller agree they will not show.
Yeah.
Because that's their right.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't hurt to have something if you're concerned that your seller may have selective memory on what you've agreed to do. So.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you all. Really appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. And
Appreciate it. Anytime, just give us a holler. We'll be glad to answer questions.
really appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, take care.
Thanks.